Now to that CBS 2 investigators exclusive, a story about another bad raid by Chicago police that the city's legal team is trying to stop us from telling you. It involves an innocent woman getting handcuffed, naked, with a dozen male officers watching. Now, she wants you to see the body camera video, but tonight the city went to federal court to try to keep it secret. Here's CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini.
I had just gotten home from work. And while I was undressing in my bedroom.
It was a cold February night, and Anjanette Young, a social worker, had just finished her shift at the hospital.
You see them running up to the apartment complex with the battering ram in their hand,
Chicago Police Search Warrant! Go!
a crowbar. It was so traumatic to hear the way the thing was hitting the door.
Go!
And it happened so fast, I didn't have time to put on clothes.
And suddenly, she found herself frozen in fear, completely naked, in a room full of men. 9 body cameras rolling.
And you're just standing there.
And I'm just standing there. I mean, terrified, humiliated, not even understanding why in that moment that this is happening to me.
And the first thing police reach for is not clothing, it's handcuffs.
There were big guns and guns with lights and scopes on them, and they were yelling at me, you know, put your hands up, put your hands up.
What are you thinking right now?
I just remember, you know, being so afraid. It's one of those moments where I just felt like that I could have died that night. If I had made one wrong move, I felt like they would have shot me. I truly believe that they would have shot me.
A police officer wraps a short coat around her shoulder, still leaving her front fully exposed. Even the sergeant in charge of the raid just stands there talking to her while she has nothing covering her.
You're telling me to relax something you guys have just... My name is Anjanette Young. What is going on?
Then she gets a blanket.
They just threw something over me. And my hands are behind my back and I'm handcuffed. So there was no way for me to secure the blanket that they put around me.
But the blanket just keeps sliding open. More humiliation.
You need to tell me what you're looking for. What are you looking for?
You can see how some officers just stand there, until this one, wearing a mask, sees what's happening and goes and holds it in place.
It felt like forever for me. It felt like forever.
Oh my God, this cannot be right. How is this legal?
Listen how she repeatedly tells the raid team they were in the wrong place.
You have the wrong place. You got the wrong house. You got the wrong house.
We counted. She says it at least 43 times.
You got the wrong house.
And she was right. They were in the wrong house. Our investigation uncovered police failed to do the most basic research before getting the search warrant approved. We found they simply took the word of an informant who gave them Anjanette Young's address. The informant claimed a 23-year-old man who was a known felon had a gun and ammo inside.
I don't know who that person is. I've been living here for 4 years and nobody lives here but me. Okay, you don't have to shout. I don't have to shout. This is ridiculous. You got me in handcuffs. I'm naked. You've kicked my house in. And I keep telling you, you got the wrong place.
Then, during the raid, something happens. Watch as 2 of the officers go to their squad car and begin reviewing their notes about the warrant. CPD would not comment on what you're about to hear the officers saying a few minutes later.
It wasn't initially approved or some crap.
What does that mean?
I have no idea, because they told him it was approved, and then I guess that person messed up on their end.
Messed up is an understatement. So, where was the target? Our investigation revealed he was awaiting trial on home confinement here at a different apartment in Anjanette Young's complex. How easy would it have been to locate him? Easy, real easy, because he was wearing a police tracking device, an electronic monitoring bracelet. It's possible he could have even heard the raid happening, because records show He was confined to the unit right next door.
But I'm telling you it's wrong. Asking you to let me call somebody. I'm asking you to let me put some clothes on. I'll sit here and let you do whatever you need to do. But let me call somebody, let me call an attorney, because I'm telling you this is wrong. I have nothing to do with whoever this person is you're looking for.
We found if they would have done a little bit more research, they might have found where the target actually lived.
Yes.
I think Screw Up was being too kind, because ultimately this is a constitutional rights issue.
Keenan Salter is Anjanette Young's attorney and is suing the police department.
If this had been a young woman in Lincoln Park by herself in her home, naked, a young white woman, let's just be frank, if the reaction would have been the same. I don't think it would have been. I think they would have saw that woman, rightfully so, as someone who was vulnerable, someone who deserved protection, someone who deserved to have their dignity maintained. They viewed Ms. Young as less than human.
Can I please call somebody?
Yeah, man, relax. Just relax, all right?
How can I relax when this is going on?
They did eventually walk her to a room to remove the handcuffs so she could get dressed, but then put them right back on and kept questioning her.
There are no firearms in this place.
There's no gun in this place. I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker for 20 years. I follow the law. I don't get in trouble for anything. I don't do illegal stuff. I'm not that person. You got the wrong information.
At this point, the sergeant in charge of the raid tells the officer who got the warrant to step outside.
Let's go talk outside.
But you won't hear it because once outside, the body camera is shut off. Back inside Anjanette's home, another officer finally uncuffs her. She had been bound for 20 minutes. Listen as the sergeant returns with a new message.
We believe your story.
And you can see him trying to fix the door they busted so she could close it and lock it. But it was too damaged to repair, so watch as they try to find something to wedge it shut. They settle on an ironing board.
Surreal?
Surreal. It's almost like a bad movie. When I watch this, I feel like I'm watching a movie. But those are no actors. I'm no actor. This is my real life. And it happened to me. They're adding trauma to people's lives that will be with them for the rest of their lives. The work is warranted. They need to do the work, but they need to do it right. They can't just callously do it and leave people's lives in ruins because they got it wrong.
The sergeant in charge apologized to her before he left. CPD has refused to comment on this case. It's been 2 years since the raid, and COPA, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, says they're still in the process of trying to interview all of the officers involved. They did not say if anyone has been disciplined. At City Hall, Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.
I am deeply sorry and troubled that her home was invaded. That is just not right. It simply should not have happened. It's a colossal mess.
For more than 2 years now, the CBS 2 investigators have been documenting individual cases, trying to put together a big picture look at these deep cultural issues at the department. But at every turn, we've been met with anything from lack of transparency to downright stonewalling.
Do you remember what the police did to that door?
They knocked that door off.
They knocked it off?
That thing.
4-year-old Lily was with her grandma, Sharon Lyons, when police busted into their home.
Next thing I know, the whole panel to the side of my door came flying down.
They are the latest victims of a bad Chicago police raid.
For them people to come in my house like that, it ain't did me no good.
It happened in February, just 1 month after CPD sat down with the CBS 2 investigators and made a commitment to put a stop to these wrong raids.
We don't want to see that happen. We don't want to erode the trust with the community.
The commitment to change how police obtain and execute search warrants came nearly 2 years after the CBS 2 investigators started exposing a disturbing pattern of officers raiding the homes of innocent families in Chicago's black and brown neighborhoods. And yet they did it again.
And that's when they had the machine guns and whatever guns them was, they was in my face.
You can still see the damage to Sharon Lyons' door as the raid team was on the hunt for a drug dealer police only knew by the name of Blondie. We'd show you a mugshot of Blondie, but they don't have one. According to the complaint for search warrant, they took the word of a paid informant who said Blondie was selling drugs in the apartment building, but didn't know Blondie's real name and could only describe Blondie as a black transgender woman about 5'9" with a blonde wig. And then, without independently verifying who Blondie really was, broke through this door.
This is from the police. When they hit it with whatever they hit it with.
Her door is among many in black and Latino communities where we found the vast majority of search warrants are executed by Chicago police.
Chicago police!
Wrong door!
We really wanted to know how often wrong raids happen, but the police department, after a year of telling us they do track wrong raids, finally admitted they don't. In the end, our reporting forced them to turn over whatever records they do have, and they gave us this. It's a database of every search warrant executed from 2016 to 2019. There were a total of 6,800. After we mapped the data, we quickly learned it's not just about how often these warrants were executed, but where.
They used a tank, rammed the door.
Our mapping found the neighborhood with the most is Inglewood, where Sharnia Phillips was wrongly raided in 2017.
I could have been killed.
Inglewood had 872 search warrants. Also in the top 5 neighborhoods are Austin with 668, North Lawndale 455, Garfield Park 442, and Humboldt Park with 376. Census data shows these neighborhoods are all nearly 90% or more black and Latino. We found only a small percentage happen in white neighborhoods and none listed for Edison Park, Printers Row, Wrigleyville, Museum Campus, and Magnificent Mile.
We the targets, black people.
Demetrius Laban and his sister were also wrongly raided in 2017 in the North Lawndale neighborhood.
I was scared.
Sharon Lyons' neighborhood, back of the yards, ranks 7th for the most search warrants with 290.
Get out.
She says her son Julius, who has autism, started to run when he saw the guns and her on the floor.
My mom. On floor.
Were you afraid for them all?
Yeah. Scared.
Police then searched the apartment where no one had ever heard of anyone named Blondie and found nothing, no drugs at all. Our analysis of CPD's own data shows 72% of search warrants were for illegal drugs. So how often do police find drugs? Out of the 4,900 drug-related search warrants, they only confiscated drugs in 221 cases. That's less than 5% of the time.
Search warrant, Chicago police!
Like here in 2019, during this wrong raid for drugs on the Archie family. All police found were 3 terrified children who they pointed guns at and ordered to the floor.
Please do not shoot me, please.
You're fine.
And during the most recent raid on the Lyons family,
Did they point the guns at you? They did?
Lily's uncle James couldn't believe they pointed a gun at her.
You're here in handcuffs, and you're on the ground, but you're thinking about your niece.
They went through with their guns out, and I just heard my niece start screaming. She was so helpless at the time. Like, none of us could have helped her.
You're seeing a few stories here. You're seeing people terrorized and traumatized in their own homes. You're seeing children traumatized at the sight of weapons pointed at them and their families. But there's another story that you also just saw, and that's data that we were able to compile. It's a dogfight to get that data, and it shouldn't be that way. It's taken us 2 years to get that data, to tell you that story about where these raids were happening and to what people they were happening to, what neighborhoods they were happening in. And that's the battle that we've had for the last 2 years during our series on Warranted and trying to get answers. And that's why Anjanette Young came to us, because she saw stories like this.
We begin tonight with another stunning development in the case of a botched raid by Chicago police. The city's top attorney, Mark Flessner, has resigned over the handling of the Anjanette Young case. She is the social worker who was handcuffed naked during a bad raid in February of 2019. Since then, CPD and the city have been fighting to keep the police body cam video secret, including going to federal court last week to try to stop CBS 2 from sharing them with you. Mayor Lori Lightfoot promised to hold people in her administration accountable. Here's CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini on today's fallout.
The city's top lawyer has resigned, the first to be held accountable over the handling of the botched Chicago police raid of Anjanette Young's home.
You
The resignation comes 2 days after the CBS 2 investigators revealed there were key body cams from that night Young and her legal team were never given. This is one of 6 body camera videos the city failed to turn over, despite a lawsuit requiring they disclose evidence in the wrong raid. One of those body cams withheld shows the first officer through the door, who points a high-powered rifle at the innocent woman. Young had just gotten undressed after a long week of work and was changing into pajamas when the raid team burst in.
Go, 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 go! Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands! Don't move! Come out into the living room!
The 6 extra videos only came to light after the city complied with a Freedom of Information Act request we submitted last year. 2 days ago, they finally gave up all the video. That's when the CBS 2 investigators discovered the 6 additional body cam videos. The video is also significant since it shows the pointing of a gun at an innocent person, a use of force. On Thursday, Mayor Lightfoot, in a one-on-one interview, said she never saw the body cam videos of the Young raid, even though the CBS 2 investigators informed her office about them in November of 2019. Now she vows a full investigation.
You know people saw this video in your administration.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make you wonder why you didn't know about it?
No, it makes me angry that I didn't know about it. It makes me angry that decisive action wasn't taken. People saw this video. They watched it. And
people in your administration?
Correct.
People that you trust?
Correct. Well, people in my administration saw this, whether it's police department, law department, COPA. I saw the video, and someone should have acted. Someone should have certainly raised it to my level. Look at this video, and that didn't happen.
The mayor also said the law department, headed by Mark Flessner, and her top administration would be the subject of a top-to-bottom review.
It was just so hard to see the city law office threaten CBS with an emergency motion to try to tell us
and I've been very clear about that. That should never have happened. You're doing your job. And part of legitimacy of government means transparency. And as I said to the law department today in writing and orally, the media plays an important role in our government to hold us accountable, to make sure that there is transparency. And had I known about it, it never would have happened. I would have stopped it right in its tracks. It was a wrong thing to do. I made that abundantly clear. I can't imagine a set of circumstances where I'd ever approve that again, but it can never happen without my prior written consent. If for some reason it ever would, and it better not, I will fire everyone involved. I will not hesitate.
Anjanette Young and her attorney are planning on refiling a lawsuit tomorrow in state court. And while the mayor's administration is under investigation at this hour, we know of no one at the Chicago Police Department to be disciplined for this very wrong and botched, humiliating raid.
Now to the CBS 2 investigators. Critics say policy changes announced today related to how Chicago police get and execute search warrants falls short of addressing a pattern of wrong raids first exposed by the CBS 2 investigators. For the first time, police will have to track wrong raids that result from faulty information, like the raid on Anjanette Young, who was undressed, getting ready for bed when officers busted into her home in 2019. Mayor Lightfoot is also calling for changes to how police plan their raids and a higher level of supervision on scene during a raid. Here's CBS 2 investigator Dave Savine.
Any individuals found within a location where a search warrant is executed must be treated with dignity and respect.
Go, 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 go!
The mandate? Dignity and respect, and not to be treated how these women were during their wrong raids.
To be led out in nothing but your t-shirt and underwear for the whole entire neighborhood to see.
So you're standing out on 71st Street in your socks and basically underwear and pajamas.
That's it.
And it's 30 degrees out.
30 degrees out, freezing.
But their stories and dozens of other wrong raids the CBS 2 investigators uncovered weren't enough to prompt this kind of change we are hearing promised today. Sweeping reforms only just now being recommended after we revealed in December the cover-up of a botched Chicago police raid on Anjanette Young's home.
They're adding trauma to people's lives that will be with them for the rest of their lives.
And even though that February 2019 raid occurred before I was mayor, we have owned and we have a responsibility to make right what was wrong.
But other wrong raids documented in our more than 2-year investigation did occur under her watch. This is the second time in 14 months Mayor Lightfoot has drafted a new search warrant policy.
Did they point the guns at you? They did?
Just 1 month after the city's first pass at a new policy last year, 4-year-old Lily ended up staring down the barrel of a police gun. Mayor Lightfoot says planning sessions will now occur to make sure there are no children or vulnerable people inside. And any time a gun is pointed, it will be logged and investigated.
Do you remember what the police did to that door?
They knocked that door off.
But for all the progress this new proposal makes, there is still no mention of giving people time to get to the door after police knock, or let them see the warrant once officers are inside their home.
They just go in. They don't give anybody time to get to the door.
That shouldn't be happening. And now, because there's a requirement that everything related to a search warrant, a body-worn camera has to be present and activated. When we see that happening, that's going to be a problem.
And what also isn't spelled out is what will happen to officers who violate the rules.
So when something like that happens, then there's going to be accountability, Dave. That's why we have policies, and we hold people accountable to those policies.
Nobody's been disciplined yet for any of these raids.
Those, I believe, I don't know the specifics, but if that has been brought to our attention, they're under investigation.
So this is just a draft policy that the mayor has put out there, and it's open to review and more changes for at least the next 2 weeks. But one component that is truly lacking here is language about discipline. Will officers be disciplined? How will that look? When will it start happening? It's clear none of the officers involved in any of the raids we've exposed over the last 2.5 years have ever been disciplined. Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.
They've done it again. This surveillance image of Chicago police raiding a family's home might have gone under the radar, except for one detail: when it was taken. 11 days after the city publicly announced reforms to the way officers get and obtain search warrants.
Yeah, it was a great show, great speech. But as CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini reveals, it seems the raid teams didn't get the message.
They treated us like we were below them.
Any individuals found within a location where a search warrant is executed must be treated with dignity and respect.
The mayor's pledge.
Do you feel like they should have treated your family with more respect?
Yeah.
And the police superintendent's vow.
So the real question you're asking is if treating someone with respect gets in the way of doing our job. And the answer is no.
Promises of reform made after the CBS 2 investigators exposed dozens of bad raids on innocent families over the last 3 years.
We are going to get this right.
That was March 3rd. But just 11 days later,
I never got treated like that by anybody in my entire life.
This happened. A raid team that we found violated Chicago police policy hits a home in Bridgeport with so much force the entire structure shakes.
We're still in our pajamas, just lounging around.
It was a Sunday morning and George Garcia's birthday. His wife Kimberly and their 2 children, 12-year-old Georgie and 3-year-old Cruzy, were excited to celebrate.
And then what happened?
All of a sudden, I just hear my whole house shaking and a big bang.
Videos from the Garcia's home security system show police pulling up, a team of officers with guns and a battering ram heading to the side door to break it down. Only problem? The search warrant they are holding was not properly approved.
I just heard like boom, boom, boom.
Even before that March 3rd news conference, Chicago police policy required a lieutenant or above verify and approve all search warrants. Now the city says it's an even higher rank, a deputy chief who must sign off on a warrant before a judge does.
These are just some of the new pre-execution safeguards that must be followed before a search warrant can ever be presented to the state's attorney or to a court.
But none of that happened in the Garcia raid. Armed with that warrant in question, police kept ramming the door. Garcia, worried it might fall on him, ran to a window to talk to police.
So you were yelling out of a top window?
Yes. Stop hitting the door. I will open it.
And I said, hey guys, I'm trying to open the door for you guys.
Hey guys! Guys, open the door! Open the door!
Then they told him not to move.
Stay right there. Let me stay right there. Make sure we see hands. No problem. Stay right there. They're breaking the door. Hey, no, come on, hey, let me see. The door's already open.
Once inside, the raid team headed to the second floor and burst into Garcia's apartment. What was the first thing you saw?
A gun.
Then they say they tried to get to their youngest child, Cruzy.
And I'm just trying to get to my kid.
Do you see it?
I just play it over and over again.
And they just put the gun to my head and told me to turn around.
Which brings us to the city's next promise. Immediate changes to how vulnerable people, especially children, will be treated during raids. The guns were pointed at your brother and your mom.
Yeah, my dad.
Georgie Garcia says he and his little brother ended up in another room.
2 children are screaming, screaming for their parents.
So the whole time you were put in that room, you couldn't get to your mom and dad?
Yeah.
And you were scared?
I felt scared. I didn't want him to see me crying.
You were trying to console your brother?
I had to stay strong for him, so I kept my emotions and just protected him.
And then there's this. The city also promised to address one of its most widespread failures we uncovered during our multi-year investigation into wrong raids. Long before their news conference in March, it was CPD policy never to base a search warrant solely on the word of a confidential informant. But the Garcia warrant is based solely on the word of a confidential informant. There's no mention of any actual police work, no undercover drug buys, no surveillance, no verification at all that drugs were being sold out of the apartment before police burst in. Later, we see these images. The entire apartment ransacked, personal belongings and toys wrecked.
They're not doing their job. That's just it. They're just using their own system however they want, however they see fit.
The warrant only gave them the power to search Garcia's apartment on the second floor of this multi-unit building. But when they found nothing, they started to search the garage and other units too.
It makes no sense. I was sleeping, not minding my own business.
Officers searched the first floor where Michael Zastro was in bed. You can even hear the raid team talking about how it was someone else's place.
And what's this, somebody else's apartment? Yeah.
They pulled me out the room and then they started searching my whole room and the whole apartment.
And this wasn't just any raid team. All of the officers on this raid belonged to Police Superintendent David Brown's newly created Community Safety Team, formed last year during the height of unrest and widespread calls for reform, as a way to not only fight crime, but to improve trust between police and the public.
They were just laughing the whole time, like it was funny, like this was some kind of sick joke to them.
Then came the final humiliation. They went through your underwear drawer.
Mm-hmm. And not just through it, like they were holding it.
And showing it.
Yeah, like putting it up and then like giving me looks and like smirking.
But the hardest part of the raid, they say, is what it did to the children, especially Cruzy. Does he talk about seeing the guns?
Yeah, he keeps on saying monsters, and he goes like this. He's like, monsters, monsters.
In that moment, while you're handcuffed and you couldn't put your arms around your kids, what did that do to you?
They get all emotional and you can't do nothing. You can't comfort them. You can't give them a hug. You can't tell mommy's going to be okay because you don't know what's happening.
And then when they left, did they say, we're sorry?
No, they said happy birthday. And we asked them what happens with the doors. And they said he's in construction. He can figure it out himself.
The officer who got the warrant and the sergeant in charge of the raid have a combined 86 disciplinary complaint investigations, 4 of them sustained, 2 apiece. The Civilian Office of Police Accountability is now investigating what happened during the Garcia raid. Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.
In a written statement tonight, Chicago police say they, quote, immediately referred this incident to COPA, but a source familiar with the raid tells us CPD only brought it to COPA's attention after we started asking questions and submitting public records requests. Dave has, of course, done extensive reporting on the pattern of botched raids by Chicago police over the last several years. To see this award-winning body of work that's finally leading to promises of reform, visit cbschicago.com/unwarranted.